If you feel like your breath has been holding you back in your rowing workouts, you're not alone. A lot of people feel very much the same way because how do we breathe on the rowing machine? At times it can feel pretty restricted, and how do I get enough air to sustain me for these long or intense efforts? Well, that's what we're gonna answer today in Top Rowing Questions, answered by a professional rowing coach. Breathwork, depending on how deep we want to go into the discussion, can become very robust or we can keep it very simple. I'm going to try and slice that right down the middle so that we can get some of the specifics down that are going to help you to obtain a bit of a rhythm, because honestly, that's usually what people are looking for. That's usually what you're trying to get at, is how do I establish a better breathing rhythm to sustain me, as well as a little bit of education behind the breathwork so that we can figure out why are we breathing, how are we breathing, and what's it going to do for us. So let's just get into it. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm Shane Farmer, and this is Dark Horse, where you build the life that you want to live, and we just happen to use rowing usually to get you there. So this question, as with all questions that I answer for this series, come directly from The Crew, our online programming community, where you can join the largest and most welcoming indoor rowing community in the world. If you're interested in that, click the description and the link below to The Crew. Otherwise, let's get on with the question. So today's question, breathing? I've been basing my breathing on Shane's pattern in the 10-minute build. If you haven't followed along with me in that, it's a great beginner video. Highly recommend it. Go check out our 10-minute build video. But I find that at the very low stroke rate or very high stroke rate, I'm all over the place on breath work. Now, for those of you who haven't done it, again, go do that. It's a really great learning workout video and it's only 10 minutes. But the breath work that I maintain, regardless of stroke rate, is 2 breaths per stroke. So I'm just gonna do it because it's kind of easier to show than do. So as I take a stroke, if you couldn't see my rowing movement, I am inhaling, exhaling through the drive, inhaling, exhaling through the recovery. 2 breaths per stroke. And that simply increases or decreases in rate as my stroke rate increases or decreases. So where do we begin this discussion? Well, the thing you have to understand is that what we're doing with breath is we are exchanging oxygen and we are relieving ourselves of used up oxygen, CO2. And this exchange happens in our lungs, and we are trying to draw in air that is going to refresh us because we are always trying to take in fresh oxygen, use it for our purposes, and then expunge the used up stuff, the CO2. And so that's essentially the exchange that's happening when you are trying to breathe. That's your anatomy lesson for the day. What matters most is that you are efficient and effective at being able to expunge the CO2 and take in fresh oxygen. Now, that exchange becomes pretty challenging for a lot of people because we don't practice breath work a whole lot. Now, I am a huge advocate for breath work because it trains your lungs and your diaphragm to be really good. They're muscles. We have to think of them as such. A healthy set of lungs and diaphragm are going to allow us to efficiently breathe air, as well as we get pretty good in our own breath work, just day-to-day living, because we live in a pretty sympathetic state. Now, a sympathetic state comes to our sympathetic nervous system, and that is essentially our fight or flight nervous system. It's what keeps us active and going and ready to trigger. Very rarely do we spend time triggering the opposite nervous system, our parasympathetic nervous system, which is intended to down-regulate us, help us chill out. That's exactly what meditation does, is it tries to trigger parasympathetic nervous response. And so when we can trigger parasympathetic nervous response, what that means is we can learn to control our breath. It gives us the opportunity to slow our breath, work on filling our lungs more with air when we have the opportunity, and expunging more CO2 as we breathe out. And the more efficient we become at that exchange, the better athletes we become. And it's why spending time meditating and working on down-regulating, not just up-regulating, which we do plenty of in our lives, the more you can practice down-regulating and breath work, the better that exchange system becomes, the more efficient you become at breathing, the more aerobically fit you can become, because the lungs, the muscles that are there to help you with that oxygen exchange, work better. They don't suffer so quickly, and they can sustain you for longer depending on the workout that you get into, whether it's high intensity or long volume, low intensity. So that's the exchange system that we are attempting to improve. So when it comes to addressing your breath work, or the breath that comes when you are training, the reason I use 2 breaths per stroke is because that allows me to change the rate of my breathing, but not the way that I'm breathing. Now, why is that important? Well, your breath is like a metronome. If you don't know what a metronome is, it's that triangle block that sits on top of a piano and has an arm that goes tick, 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 depending on what beat per minute you need for that piece of music in particular. Think of your breath work as the metronome for your body when it comes to moving. If you need a stroke rate of 30, imagine setting your breath to the metronome tick, 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 tick that you need your body to move at. So if I need a stroke rate 30, well, I'm going to set my breathing rate to be higher. And my body's gonna come up to match the metronome. If I need to slow my stroke rate down, well, I'm first going to slow down my breath rate. And that's going to help me bring my body movement down into the lower stroke rate range that I need. And so when I change the rate of my breathing rather than the way that I'm breathing, it means that I can scale my breathing rate up or down. I always know that my breathing is going to be the same. It's always going to be 2 breaths per stroke, but if I need higher rates or lower rates, my breath is going to come and join me. Now that takes practice, and that's part of the reason that putting in meters is helpful on a machine, is because it helps you to iron in your breathing rate. Now, personally, the reason I have done that, and this was unintentional, I just did this subconsciously throughout my rowing career, was I was stroke seat. I sat at the very front of the boat. And now typically there's a coxswain there with a little box, and it tells them what the stroke rate is. But as stroke seat, I don't see that stroke rate. And so I have to internalize and try to just know what a stroke rate 16 feels like, or what a stroke rate 36 feels like. I need to understand the difference, because if the coach says go to a stroke rate 30, I have to do that with my movement so that everybody behind me can follow. And then the coxswain can tell me, we're facing each other, the coxswain can tell me you're on it or you're not. And they can tell me bring the rate up or bring the rate down to adjust accordingly. That's where it came from. And now I like to relay that to you, because you get to be the stroke seat of your own workouts when you learn to control your breath work. So when I go back to this question of, I've been basing my breathing on Shane's pattern in the 10-minute build, but I find that at the very low or the very high, I get all over the place. What comes first is learning to maintain the same breathing rhythm, we should say, 2 breaths per stroke for me. Maybe it's 1 for you. But you have to be able to take that same breathing rate and scale it up or down depending on the stroke rate that you need. When you maintain the same style of breath, let's go with that, then it's going to allow you to scale infinitely up or down, because your body knows how to breathe at that rate at all times for all things. And so if you've done the 10-minute build with me and you find that you're struggling because your breathing rate changes when you go up in stroke rate or down in stroke rate, well, that says, number 1, step back, learn to control your breathing better. And with that comes breathwork practice. There's so much more info to get into there. We can address that in a different video. But the point is, with your rowing, get comfortable setting one breathing rhythm, and then use that rhythm or that style and get good at maintaining it no matter what. So 2 breaths per stroke for me, again. If I have to take it up real high, it just becomes an efficient exchange for me. And when I need to take the rate down, I'm just gonna take it down and slow it all down, but I'm still taking the same number of breaths per stroke. So how I practice breathing for myself, you can do it in a number of ways. I love power breathing. That is 2 minutes of aggressive inhale, exhale with no holding of air at the top or the bottom. And I'll often make sure you do it laying down, because you don't want anything bad to happen, and it's always good to have somebody there with you to make sure that nothing bad happens. But at the end of that 2 minutes, you take a big inhale, exhale, and after you exhale, hold, and hold as long as you can. You'll find that you actually get pretty good at holding your breath for a long period of time. Once you finally need to inhale, take a big inhale in, and then hold again as long as you can, and then breathe out and relax, and then just come back to a normal breathing rhythm. Then once you come back to a normal breathing rhythm, you can go through the whole cycle again. And this is an excellent way to train the lungs. You end up in this hyperventilation state. So you may, again, this is why don't do this without somebody nearby you. Make sure that you are being safe in the way that you're doing it. Don't do it standing up or even sitting up. It's healthy to be laying down so that nothing can happen. You don't pass out and fall over. But I've had great luck with using that power breathing. It goes by many different names. Wim Hof uses it. You probably heard his name when it comes to breath work. And it allows you to train your lungs, your diaphragm, to become stronger muscles that are going to help and support you in your athletic endeavors, because when you can control your breathing, you can control your parasympathetic state, you become more aerobically efficient. Becoming more aerobically efficient allows you to be a better athlete. That means that you're getting better oxygen exchange. It means that oxygen exchange can drive your body, and the way that your body works is going to become better for your workout. That is a long way of getting us from point A to point B, but that is how we address our breathing. All comes down to learning what breathing rate is comfortable for you, and then learning to maintain it regardless of the workout. If you enjoyed learning about this breath work and you are looking for answers to why is this happening, or how is this happening inside of my rowing stroke, or even just my fitness in general, the crew is the place to get those questions answered. It's where I always draw these questions from, and I draw them at random. So I come find the most interesting questions, bring them here to you on the YouTube channel. If you want to become a part of that community, make sure that you are joining the crew, linked in the description below. And for more, check out our playlist of top rowing questions answered by a professional rowing coach.